Incredible moment. Humble janitor's touching act of kindness revealed to billionaire daughter. Sarah rushed through the campus, her heart racing and thoughts spiraling. The weight of her family's expectations loomed heavily over her. Just 21, she was supposed to ace her pre-law exams and seamlessly step into a role at her father's prestigious law firm. But tonight, frustration clawed at her as she found herself locked out of the library, an important paper due at dawn. The echo of her heels against the cold tile was a stark reminder that time was slipping away. Pacing, she bit her lip, feeling like a puppet with tangled strings, caught between what was expected of her and the flicker of her own aspirations. Would she ever measure up to her father's legacy? Her hands trembled, and she barely noticed the shadows dancing around her. The pressure felt unbearable, tightening her chest. She desperately wanted to be a brilliant attorney, just like her father had scripted for her. But did that mean sacrificing her own dreams? As she contemplated her looming failure, the soft sound of keys jangling her spiral of despair. James, the janitor, walked toward her with a kind smile. He often went unnoticed, just a figure in a work uniform, but tonight he stepped into the light like a beacon of hope. He unlocked the door for her, and she caught a glimpse of understanding in his eyes. His warmth was palpable in the chilly air. "Thanks," she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. Something deep within her stirred as they spoke. James shared insights about her thesis, each sentence quelling the tempest within her, igniting a spark of curiosity, knowledge redefined. Could wisdom stem from a man whose life seemed so ordinary? She felt an internal stir of tension unraveling the edges of her tightly wound expectations. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. Each passing week, their late-night conversations deepened. They explored layered ideas of privilege and grit. She felt herself drawn to his passion, a sincerity starkly different from the polished veneer of her father's world. Yet, as the bitterness of uncertainty grew, her phone buzzed with a message from her father, the request for her to intern at his firm. The allure of a secure future twisted painfully in her gut. How could she even consider it after learning about James's life, the brilliance buried beneath his humble exterior? Scrambling for answers, she uncovered pieces of James's past, a law prodigy whose dreams had been clipped by tough choices. The knowledge hit her like a punch, crystallizing the conflict within her. She was now not just a legacy, but an ally to a man gifted with brilliance. The decision loomed large, far more daunting than any exam. As the deadline for her father's offer approached, the tension in Sarah's chest tightened with each tick of the clock, drowning her in a whirlpool of expectation and desire for authenticity. She felt as if she stood on the edge of a precipice, the weight of two worlds pulling her in opposing directions. Would she step into the well-lit corridors of her father's firm, or follow the less-traveled path illuminated by a janitor who had opened her eyes? Her heart raced, the clock ticking down, the decision pulsing like a drumbeat, and she teetered on the brink of a life-altering choice. The hum of fluorescent lights filled Sarah's small apartment as she sat on the edge of her bed, her laptop casting a faint glow on her worried face. The ticking of the clock on the wall seemed to mirror her escalating pulse, each tick a reminder of the impending deadline. It was just a matter of days before she had to respond to her father's offer, and each moment that passed felt like a weight pressing down on her chest. The contrasting worlds of her father's law firm and James's life swirled in her mind. Determined to find clarity, Sarah opened her laptop to pour her thoughts onto the screen. The vibrant energy of her late-night discussions with James flowed through her fingers as she typed, transforming confusion into words. She thought of his laughter, the stories he shared, which were filled with lessons on resilience and integrity. "Does your talent define your worth, or does your situation?" she typed, reflecting on his perspective. The words held power, and suddenly the paper, with its obligatory academic structure, began feeling stifling. She longed for authenticity. How could she pledge allegiance to a legacy while forsaking her own voice? Pushing back from her desk, Sarah stood and began pacing the room, her thoughts racing. It wasn't merely a choice between two paths. It was about confronting her own identity. Who was she if she followed the path laid out before her? This realization pierced through the fog of her anxiety, igniting a flicker of determination. She took a deep breath, pausing to visualize the corridors of her father's firm. Glossy floors, suits and ties, the palpable pressure of expectations. It was a world devoid of the warmth and rawness that drew her to James. Time blurred as she lost herself in thought, questioning the privileges she took for granted and the ways they had shaped her. The notion that she could be part of a system that sidelined people like James stirred a storm inside her. She returned to her laptop, typing with renewed vigor. Her thoughts emerged as a more significant exploration of ambition, identity, and the moral dilemmas that lay at their intersection. The following day, she found herself in the library, the scent of aged paper wrapping around her like a comforting cloak. Alone, she began scribbling notes about the societal structures that dictated success, tinged with the voices of those who challenged the system. Each note brought her closer to the realization that she wanted more than to be a footnote in her father's narrative. She wanted to be a force for change. Her pen danced across the pages as her vision crystallized. With every word, she felt liberated. As the sun began to set outside, the world outside the library's large glass windows morphed into a cascade of oranges and purples. She glanced at her reflection in the glass, and for the first time, she didn't just see her father's daughter. She saw herself, a woman with potential, an architect of her fate. However, the looming choice reminded her that self-discovery came with a price. Would she confront her father and explain her desire to forge her own path? Could she bear the disappointment that would undoubtedly follow? The fear clung to her like a shadow, refusing to let go. As her hand hesitated over her notes, a text from her father flashed on her phone. "I'm looking forward to discussing your internship. Let's meet tomorrow." The text, innocuous yet loaded, churned a whirlwind of emotions inside her. The moment felt monumental, the intersection of duty and desire, the clash of expectation and authenticity. She breathed deeply, standing at the crossroads of her life, determined to reclaim her narrative. With each passing second of deliberation, the urgency grew, begging her to decide. What would she say? How would she explain her newfound resolve without losing everything? The path unfolded before her as she faced herself in the reflection of the window, the answer hanging just out of reach. The moment of truth was dawning, and she felt the weight of her choices pressing upon her with more intensity than ever before. The next day would demand clarity, and no matter the outcome, her answer would redefine her forever. Sarah awoke to the sound of birds chirping outside her window, a stark contrast to the tumult inside her mind. Today was the day. The sun streamed through the curtains, illuminating her apprehension. She felt the familiar weight settle on her shoulders, a mix of anticipation and fear, mixed with a resolve that had solidified during the long hours spent contemplating her choices. As she prepared herself for the meeting with her father, she realized that every detail mattered. This wasn't just an interview, it was the foundation of her new identity. She chose her outfit carefully, a delicate balance of professionalism and personal expression, hoping to communicate that she was ready to step into the world on her own terms. Before leaving her apartment, Sarah glanced at her reflection one last time. It was only herself she saw, a woman ready to confront her past in order to pave a new future. Her heart raced as she stepped outside, the air crisp and electrifying. Each step toward the law firm felt like a symbolic act of resistance against the life her father envisioned for her. Entering the building, she was momentarily overwhelmed by the polished surface of the lobby. Men and women in tailored suits glided past her like fleeting shadows, their faces a mix of seriousness and ambition. It was the same world that had always seemed to close in on her, but today it felt different. Today she was no longer just a visitor, she was a challenger, ready to be heard. She reached his office, the door looming before her like a vault containing the narrative of her life. Taking a deep breath, she knocked. Her father's voice called her in, and she stepped into the well-appointed office, the scent of leather and polished wood hanging in the air. Her father was seated behind a massive desk, a subtle predatory glint in his eyes as he looked up. "Sarah," he said, sliding a document across the table. It was her internship offer, the one that had triggered months of confusion and introspection. She could feel her pulse quicken. This was the moment she had prepared for. Her voice shaking, she started to speak. "Dad, I've thought a lot about this opportunity, and—" The words clashed in her throat, but she pressed forward, fueled by the clarity she had fought so hard to find. "I appreciate what you've given me, but I need to explore my own path. I want to write, research, focus on social justice, perhaps even work with people like James. I don't want to just fit into what's expected of me." His expression shifted. It wasn't just a surprise, it was a mix of disbelief and disappointment. "Sarah, you have a prestigious position waiting for you. This is a chance to make something of yourself." "Isn't that the problem?" she questioned, her voice steadying. "I don't want to make something of myself at the expense of my own beliefs. I want to matter for what I create, not merely what I inherit." The silence stretched long and heavy. It hung between them like an invisible wall. Sarah clenched her fists beneath the table, aware of the gravity of her words. Her heart ached to see his facade begin to crack, revealing the father beneath, a man who had projected an idea of success like a shield. "Are you sure you want to throw this all away?" he asked, hope still laced in his tone. "I'm not throwing anything away. I'm choosing to build something real." It was a revelation, both freeing and terrifying. As the conversation waned, Sarah felt a sense of liberation swell within her. She had confronted her father, unearthing feelings she had masked beneath layers of expectation. What would come next? The ensuing silence filled the room, a palpable tension veiling their bond. Would he understand? Could this choice really bridge the chasm between their two worlds? She anticipated his response, her heart racing as uncertainty clouded her mind once again. In that moment, she realized that this conversation was merely the beginning. Every word had spoken a new truth, challenging both her and her father to acknowledge what lay ahead. She had dared to envision her story. Now, all that remained was to see if he would be willing to accept the narrative she was ready to craft. With every second, the weight of her future rested in the balance. Would she lose her father or gain his respect? The thrilling promise of the unknown loomed ahead, aching to be resolved. The silence between them filled the room, heavy and pregnant with unsaid words. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest, each beat echoing the uncertainty of her next steps. As she waited for her father to respond, the air thickened, and the polished vibe of the office seemed to fade into the background. She found herself lost in her thoughts, the enormity of her decision crashing over her like a wave. Finally, breaking the spell, her father leaned back in his chair. His gaze bore into her. "This isn't just some whim, Sarah. You understand that our family has a legacy, a name that opens doors." "Exactly," Sarah interrupted, her voice firmer than before. "A legacy I'm grateful for, but I want to carve out my own space within it. Your world is not mine unless I shape it." She watched as he wrestled with this new perspective, caught between his hopes and his daughter's fierce desire for autonomy. In the moments that followed, his face transformed from a mask of authority to one of vulnerability, perhaps a recognition of the complexities they both faced. "Then what will you do?" he asked, an underlying tremor in his voice that could only be perceived by her. "Be a writer? Advocate for change? That's not a stable career. You'll struggle." The word struggle triggered something deep within her, igniting a fierce resolve. "Struggle or not, I'll be fighting for what I believe in. That matters more to me than any corporate accolade. This is where my heart leads me." He glanced at the document he had presented moments earlier, the formal offer to the internship she had been raised to accept with zeal. She noted the lines etched on his forehead, a map of his own conflicts. Her rebellion, it seemed, affected him more deeply than she had imagined. "You think you'll make a difference in that world? You think a few words on paper could ever change the course of justice?" he challenged, framing it as a protective instinct that had served him well throughout his career. "I don't know if I could change the world," she admitted, her voice dropping slightly as her thoughts spiraled. "But I know I can spark a conversation. I want to instigate change, even if it's small at first. It's clearer to me now than it's ever been." The moment felt vulnerable yet liberating, and for the first time, Sarah sensed a change within her father's demeanor. Could there be a thawing of the rigid shell he had always encased himself in? "Everything I set up has been for your future," he stated coolly, yet there was an edge of uncertainty in his inflection, almost an admission of regret layered beneath his strategic tone. "I appreciate that, truly," she said, softening, "but my future can't be defined solely by how others constructed it. I need to build my own road, even if it means straying from the one you prepared for me." An enigmatic pause filled the room. Just as Sarah thought he might relent, the door swung open unexpectedly, interrupting their heavy exchange. James, her old friend and fellow advocate for social justice, appeared, a sunny presence that burst through the tension, unaware of the moment he had interrupted. "Sarah, I just heard about the changes at work," he exclaimed, smiling widely. "We have to strategize about our advocacy project. I know we can do it, even with the resistance we'll face." Sarah felt a wave of warmth shoot through her as she turned toward him, the stress of her father's expectations momentarily slipping away. But she sensed the quicksilver shift in her father's expression, a flash of displeasure, a sense of possessiveness. The ease she had felt a moment ago was gone. "James," her father said flatly, addressing him for the first time, tone cold and brittle, "this is a private conversation." The very air in the room crackled with tension once more, the clash of two worlds, her budding aspirations and her father's authoritative grip hanging just above the fracture point. Unnerved but resolute, Sarah met her father's gaze, and then turned to James, adrenaline coursing through her. "Actually, I think this conversation is the essence of my choices going forward," she stated, her voice unwavering. The stakes had just crystallized, and Sarah could feel it deep down. The tug of war for her future was far from over. How would she traverse this tricky terrain formed by both familial bonds and her dreams? With an unmistakable determination stirring within her, she prepared to confront the blending of her past with the future she longed to carve for herself. As she stood at the cusp of a new path, she wondered, could this pivot lead her to a crossroads of acceptance or a deeper rift? The next chapter awaited, and the outcome was uncertain. The room pulsed with an intensity that left Sarah grasping for composure. James remained at her side, oblivious to the storm brewing between father and daughter. She felt an innate pull toward him, as if his presence was a lifeline in treacherous waters. He had always grounded her, but today she needed more than comfort. She needed advocacy. "Why don't you take a seat, James?" she suggested, her voice steadying as she turned towards her father.
She understood the stakes had risen, and the confrontation with her father was no longer just about her choices, but also about inviting another perspective into the mix. James's brow furrowed slightly, but then he nodded, choosing a chair near the edge of her father's domain. "I'm not here to intrude, but if this affects our project, I think it's essential we discuss our strategy together." Her father's eyes darkened, a clear signal of disapproval. "There's no need for outside input in family matters," he said, his words clipped and incisive. Yet a small flicker of intrigue crossed his features when he met Sarah's gaze, a signal perhaps that he was processing the weight of her stand. "Dad, not every conversation needs to unfold in isolation. You taught me collaboration is key in the business world. Why should this be different?" The slight shift in her voice, now laced with intensity, revealed her determination to dismantle his walls, even if just a little. James leaned forward, enthusiasm bubbling under the surface. "Sarah's right. We must strategize our next steps for the advocacy work. Resistance is coming, and the more voices we have, the louder the message." "Advocacy?" her father questioned, the word dripping from his tongue as if it were foreign to him. "You want to spend your energy on causes that won't yield anything meaningful? This is not the way forward." Each dismissive comment felt like a blow, stoking a fire within Sarah. She began to see the futility in trying to gain his validation. It was time to carve a different path that lodged in her own motivations. "It's not about the immediate results. It's about creating a foundation for dialogue, shifting perspectives one conversation at a time," she said firmly, clarity emerging from her initial uncertainty. The strategies her father had employed over the years fell flat against her growing resolve. She could feel James's warmth radiating beside her, emboldening her to keep pressing forward. "I'm asking you to see that this is a vital part of me, whether you approve or not." Their eyes met again, and for a fleeting moment, vulnerability surfaced in her father's expression. Would he ever let go of his tightly controlled vision of her future? With tension wrapping around them, she turned to James. He caught her gaze, his eyes twinkling with encouragement. "Remember, Sarah, changes begin with those who dare to challenge the status quo. Let's show them what we can do together." "Advocacy?" her father questioned, the word dripping from his tongue as if it were foreign to him. "You want to spend your energy on causes that won't yield anything meaningful? This is not the way forward." Each dismissive comment felt like a blow, stoking a fire within Sarah. She began to see the futility in trying to gain his validation. It was time to carve a different path that lodged in her own motivations. "It's not about the immediate results. It's about creating a foundation for dialogue, shifting perspectives one conversation at a time," she said firmly, clarity emerging from her initial uncertainty. The strategies her father had employed over the years fell flat against her growing resolve. She could feel James's warmth radiating beside her, emboldening her to keep pressing forward. "I'm asking you to see that this is a vital part of me, whether you approve or not." Their eyes met again, and for a fleeting moment, vulnerability surfaced in her father's expression. Would he ever let go of his tightly controlled vision of her future? With tension wrapping around them, she turned to James. He caught her gaze, his eyes twinkling with encouragement. "Remember, Sarah, Changes begin with those who dare to challenge the status quo. Let's show them what we can do together. This was the part Sarah had been missing, the realization that she didn't have to do this alone. Suddenly craving more than just her father's grudging acceptance, she imagined the kind of leader she wanted to be, one who inspired others to break free from constraints, starting perhaps with her own family. As she pondered her next words, a sense of clarity washed over her. I'm ready to face whatever backlash comes from following my heart. This conversation marks the beginning of me being true to myself.
Silence blanketed the room again, heavy but charged. Her father looked momentarily stunned, perhaps wrestling with the notion that his daughter might embrace discomfort as a necessary component of her growth. "Sarah, if you walk this path," he began, hesitating. "The path that's true to me," she emphasized, silencing the defeatism creeping into his tone. Before he could protest further, a knock at the door interrupted the tension once more. This time, it wasn't just a casual inquiry for someone to come in. It carried urgency. The door opened just enough to reveal a nervous intern holding a stack of papers trembling in her hands. "Sir, the board just approved a new initiative, but they need you to weigh in immediately," she stammered, anguish evident in her posture. In this pivotal moment, as her father's focus shifted to the demands of his corporate life, Sarah felt an exhilarating rush of liberation. She stood firm, knowing she held the reins of her own narrative. A maze of possibilities awaited her beyond this threshold, fueled by her newly embraced purpose and the support of her loyal friend by her side. What new challenges lay ahead, and could she integrate this newfound courage into an ever-complex reality? Quelling the tremors in her hands, Sarah took a breath, fully aware she was about to step into the fray. Would she have the strength to keep pushing forward, no matter what chaos erupted next? The weight of her father's dismissal hung in the air as he turned his back without another glance, hurriedly consulting the intern. Sarah felt an unexpected mixture of triumph and apprehension swell within her. This confrontation was meant to be a declaration, a bold step toward forging her own identity regardless of familial expectations. But how was she supposed to navigate this newfound independence in a world that seemed so defined by her father's shadow? James remained seated, his eyes fixed on Sarah, a calm affirmation of her stance. "You did well. That took guts," he said, his voice steady. She could hear the admiration in his tone, a balm that soothed the raw edges of her anxiety. "Thanks," she replied, trying to steady her breathing. "But what now?" The question hung in the air, pressing down like the remnants of tension in the room. "You keep moving forward," he urged, standing up with purpose. "Remember how you talked about strategy? Let's put that into action. This is your moment to seize." His encouragement ignited a flicker of determination within her. She had always been good at strategizing for projects, but those skills had always been brushed aside in her personal life. Now, armed with a sense of agency, she felt compelled to stand firm and carve out her own place within the organization. Not just her father's daughter, but as Sarah, a powerful advocate for change. Meeting his gaze fully, she allowed herself to imagine a different future, one where she could both honor her feelings and make a tangible impact.
"I want to present our advocacy ideas at the next board meeting," she decided, the words spilling forth with newfound clarity. "If I can show them how this work aligns with the company's values, it cannot be dismissed." "You'll need a solid pitch," James replied, leaning back against the desk, arms crossed as he considered her proposal. "But I think you can do it. Let's brainstorm how we can articulate the connection between profit and purpose." She felt the edges of self-doubt begin to loosen as she and James rifled through ideas, each concept bringing a rush of adrenaline. They tossed thoughts back and forth, sketching out the impact and importance of advocacy work intertwined with corporate responsibility. Ideas sprinted through her mind like wildfire.
partnerships with local organizations, impact reports promoting corporate social responsibility, justifications that highlighted how advocacy could translate into a positive corporate image. In this moment, Sarah began to feel exhilaration replace anxiety. She tapped into a reservoir of creativity she had never fully acknowledged. Fighting for something she believed in brought clarity, focus, and even passion. How often had she silenced her own ideas to appease others? Today felt like a turning point, realization and action converging. The hours vanished as they worked, and even as fatigue threatened to pull her down, Sarah leaned into her ambitions. Each line of their pitch crafted her into the leader she yearned to be. But beneath her exhilaration, a nagging thought lingered. Would the board embrace her ideas or dismiss them as frivolous? What if she returned to a hostile environment? The reality of possible rejection constrained her thoughts briefly before she shook it off. "I'm ready for this," she asserted, her voice lifting in resolve. "I won't go back to hiding in the shadows." James's smile widened, and she could see how he respected her metamorphosis. "I know you're ready, but remember, it won't be easy. You'll face pushback, especially from your father." His reminder struck a resonant chord, staring down the dual reality of her home and work life. Walking this path she deeply craved meant standing up to not only her father, but also the expectations he had cast upon her. As the evening wore on and they began to prepare the materials for the pitch, Sarah felt the landscape of her life shifting, the play of shadows sparked by the audacity to rise. But as hope bloomed, so did the reality that she would now need allies and grit to navigate through the inevitable storm brewing around her initiatives. Could she truly hold her own against the formidable forces of corporate tradition? Standing on the precipice of change, Sarah understood that the next steps would shape her future. Within her lay the potential to redefine not only herself, but also the legacy she would claim. What unexpected alliances would she forge, and what dangerous battles loomed ahead? The boardroom buzzed with a cautious energy as Sarah settled into her seat, the tension palpable like a storm on the horizon. Her heart raced, not just with anticipation, but with the weight of expectations. Today was not merely another meeting, it was a potential turning point for her career and identity. She had translated her racing thoughts into a compelling pitch, one that showcased her advocacy ideas and linked them to the company's core values. As she glanced around the table at the familiar faces of board members, a sense of unfamiliarity crept in. Instead of viewing them as the gatekeepers of her father's empire, they morphed into critical players in her self-defined narrative. She appreciated their expertise, but felt the need to nudge them toward a different perspective, one that championed corporate responsibility in line with profit. James had stood by her throughout the preparation, reinforcing her resolve without overshadowing her voice. His confidence was infectious, but at that moment, her confidence ebbed slightly. Would they see the merits of her passion for advocacy? Was she truly ready to present this vision, especially knowing how hard her father had drilled the notion of business first into her? The meeting commenced, and a mixture of gravelly voices and polished pitches floated around the room. One by one, colleagues shared their targets and strategies. The old guard of the board remained entrenched in traditional metrics of success. The longer they spoke, the heavier her heart became. When her turn finally arrived, Sarah stood tall, taking a measured breath to quiet her spiraling thoughts. "Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak today. I want to discuss how integrating advocacy into our corporate strategy can drive not only our profitability, but also foster a culture of responsible business." She began to share her insights, leaning into the connections she'd drawn, emphasizing impact over income. As her voice gained strength, she surprised herself with the fervor, each statistic and example weaving together to illustrate the tangible benefits of her proposals. Yet, a wave of apprehension surfaced when she heard the familiar voice of her father, his skeptical tones cutting through her momentum. "Sarah, while your intentions are commendable, how exactly does this translate to our shareholders? Advocacy sounds nice, but are we sacrificing profit for purpose?" His words hung in the air, a challenge that tested her newfound resolve. Her immediate reaction was a jolt of frustration mixed with the faint echo of years spent under his scrutiny. "Dad, I understand that profit is crucial, but I firmly believe we can achieve both. Companies that actively engage in advocacy see increased customer loyalty and brand value. Isn't that what we want? To be seen as leaders in our industry for more than just our bottom line?" Silence enveloped the room.
The board members exchanged glances, uncertainty brewing amidst the storm Sarah had pointedly called out. Seizing the moment, she continued, "By taking these steps, we can be at the forefront of a movement that sets us apart from the competition, and that creates value beyond just numbers." James shot her an encouraging smile, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. His approval reinvigorated her passion, driving her to deepen her argument with anecdotes of companies that had transformed their futures through similar strategies. She highlighted successful partnerships and community impacts, painting a vivid picture of how change could elevate their brand. As she neared the conclusion of her pitch, doubt mixed with fear clawed at her resolve. Would they embrace this revolutionary idea or resist it due to tradition? Just as she finished, the room erupted into discussion, and her heart raced with both hope and fear. Then a few voices in favor emerged, mingled with skepticism. "Are you prepared to lead this initiative if it doesn't produce results immediately?" another board member queried. "Absolutely," she replied, her voice steady and unwavering. "I am committed to seeing this through, no matter the challenges. I've done the groundwork and am ready to assemble a team to drive this forward." The conversation expanded, opinions vastly contrasting, but within it, Sarah found allies she hadn't expected. Their enthusiasm pushed her resolve further, allowing her to combat lingering doubts that whispered defeat. As discussions turned to logistics and next steps, a strong surge of vitality coursed through her. She realized she was not just championing an idea, but slowly building her identity, piece by piece. The shadows of expectation began to loosen their grip, if only slightly. But just as the momentum shifted, her gaze caught her father's steely expression, fueled by disbelief and perhaps disappointment. She sensed the chasm between them widen, not just as father and daughter, but as opposing visions of what they could represent. As the meeting concluded and the board members filed out, Sarah felt exhilarated yet apprehensive. The path she had chosen would undoubtedly lead her into direct conflict with her father, a confrontation she had yet to fully confront. Standing firm in her resolve, she knew this was only the beginning of the challenges that lay ahead. Would she find allies willing to join her cause, or would she have to rally alone against the forces that threatened to pull her back into obscurity? The moment she stepped into her father's office, she braced herself for the inevitable clash, determination solidifying her stance. The time had come to face the headwinds of opposition and define her journey on her terms. As Sarah stepped into her father's office, the air felt charged, a suffocating weight pressing on her shoulders. The polished wood and leather accents that had once felt reassuring now loomed intimidatingly around her. She sensed the chasm between them widen, not just as father and daughter, but as opposing visions of what they could represent. As the meeting concluded and the board members filed out, Sarah felt exhilarated yet apprehensive. The path she had chosen would undoubtedly lead her into direct conflict with her father, a confrontation she had yet to fully confront. Standing firm in her resolve, she knew this was only the beginning of the challenges that lay ahead. Would she find allies willing to join her cause, or would she have to rally alone against the forces that threatened to pull her back into obscurity? The moment she stepped into her father's office, she braced herself for the inevitable clash, determination solidifying her stance. The time had come to face the headwinds of opposition and define her journey on her terms. She focused on the deep breath she took, attempting to steady her racing heart. This was the moment she had anticipated but dreaded all the same. A moment where conviction would clash with years of paternal expectations. Her father looked up from his desk, eyes narrowing, an unmistakable challenge silently conveyed in his gaze. "You've stirred the pot quite a bit today," he remarked, his voice devoid of warmth. "You really think you can change the company's direction?" "Yes, I do," she replied, finding an unexpected strength in her response. It was crucial that she stood her ground. Her identity and vision depended on it. "I believe we can be profitable while also making tangible impacts in the community." He leaned back, arms crossed, the very image of skepticism. "And what happens when those tangible impacts don't translate into profits? Are you prepared to face the consequences of such a gamble?" His words hit hard, her mind racing back to the numbers she'd pored over in preparing her pitch. She had meticulously outlined how advocacy could translate to increased revenue, but his doubt made her question the clarity of her own arguments. She swallowed hard, feeling the urge to retreat from this confrontation, but the resolve she'd cultivated in the boardroom earlier pulsed within her. "Dad, you've taught me to think about the long-term benefits of any investment. You built this empire on foresight, not just profits from quarter to quarter. Don't you see that society is changing? Consumers are looking for authenticity, and they are willing to support brands that truly represent their values." His face tightened, betraying the struggle within him. The man who had built a legacy on calculated risks now floundered in the face of a shifting landscape he hadn't fully grasped. Suddenly, Sarah realized this wasn't just about convincing the board or defending her ideas. It was about challenging her father's view of the world, a world she had inherited but wanted to redefine. "You will fail if you continue down this path," he warned, his tone dropping to a gravelly whisper. "I won't watch you destroy what took me decades to build for some idealistic vision." Frustration flared inside her, mingling with a fierce determination. "What if I told you that adapting our business to meet these ideals can ensure its survival? Look at the companies that thrive. They innovate not only in product, but in principles. I'm not asking you to abandon profit. I'm asking you to embrace a broader definition of success." For a moment, silence filled the space between them. Her father's rigid demeanor faltered, but doubt still shadowed his expression. The decades of care he had invested into the company were not likely to be relinquished to a young woman cultivated in the shadows of his legacy. As a long pause settled, she felt her conviction harden. "If you truly believe in this company and its future, why can't you trust that I can lead us there with a new approach?" He stood abruptly, tension visibly radiating from him, and for a second, Sarah feared he would send her away. Instead, he leaned over the desk, gazing deeply into her eyes, searching for any sign of weakness. She held his gaze firmly, refusing to relent this time. Instead of backing down, Sarah felt an awakening. This wasn't just a battle for her ideas. It was a personal fight for identity and agency within a legacy that felt increasingly stifling. What was at stake now was her right to assert her vision, regardless of the cost. "Maybe we both need to understand how far we're willing to go for this company," he finally said, the frustrated edge of his voice softening. "If you want to lead this initiative, you will have to prove it. There cannot be any slip-ups, or it will be held against you." An uneasy truce formed in that moment, filled with unspoken terms of engagement. Sarah nodded slowly, her determination flaring anew. "I will prove it, not only to you, but to everyone who believes in what I'm saying. I will not fail." As she turned to leave, adrenaline surged through her veins, prompting her to start planning what lay ahead. But in the depths of her resolve lingered a new question. Was she ready to shoulder the burdens of this challenge alone? With her mind racing through the next steps, her pulse quickened, realizing that the coming days would be a crucible, testing both her resolve and her worth. Would she be able to forge her vision amidst an atmosphere thick with skepticism? And how deep would she need to dig to unearth the resources hidden within herself? As she crossed the threshold, she paused momentarily, feeling the weight of her decision pull her back. The time for action had begun, but what awaited her across the threshold felt even more daunting. A wave of uncertainty swept over her, reinforcing a question she had yet to confront. Was the cost of her ambition worth the risk of familial estrangement? The days that followed felt like a whirlwind, each one presenting new challenges to Sarah as she navigated the treacherous waters of her father's company. The pushback came from everywhere, board members whispering doubts, employees exchanging glances filled with skepticism, and even some who subtly aligned with her father's traditionalist viewpoint. She was immediately aware that changing perceptions would demand more than just a presentation of her ideas. It required her to fundamentally recalibrate her approach. In the quiet of early mornings, often isolated in her office, Sarah began sketching out strategic initiatives that aligned with both her vision and the company's financial goals. These plans combined philanthropy with commercialization, community workshops that not only benefited local households but also became platforms for the company's brand. As she mapped out these strategies, she unearthed her knack for analysis, realizing she could blend data-driven decision-making with impactful storytelling. However, with every path she explored, voices of doubt echoed in her mind, especially her father's stark warning about failure. It became increasingly clear that she grappled not only with external perceptions, but also with her internal fear of inadequacy. Was she truly cut out for this? Was this venture merely an idealistic fight against the immovable entities of her father's world? "Well, I guess the apple truly doesn't fall far from the tree," came a mocking voice from the doorway, breaking her concentration. It was Mark, another executive whom she knew to be loyal to her father's ideas. "Maybe instead of trying to change everything, you should focus on what you're good at, staying in your lane." Heat flushed through Sarah, but instead of biting back, she forced a steady breath. Confronting him directly would only lead to chaos. Instead, she went back to her plans as if invulnerable to distraction, but inside, doubts stirred. That evening, Sarah stayed late, determined to refine her presentation for the upcoming board meeting. The dim light of her office illuminated charts and graphs that turned from abstract numbers into a visual manifesto of her vision. Each connection she drew between socially responsible practices and projected profitability became a small victory, fostering a growing resilience within her. She was constructing a narrative not just for the board, but for herself, one that held the potential to redefine her place within the company and in her father's eyes. But as her confidence began to swell, the pressure intensified. Key decisions loomed with a burning urgency. Would following through with her plan ultimately unravel her father's legacy, or could it breathe new life into it? The stakes felt impossibly high, and with them came profound realizations about her own motivations. Was her yearning for approval obscuring her vision? At the climax of this internal struggle, Sarah overheard a conversation between two colleagues in the hallway. "I just don't think she understands how daunting his expectations are," one said, while the other murmured something akin to loyalty to the old ways. Each word weighed heavily on her heart, a stark reminder that her journey ahead would not only be a test of her capabilities, but a confrontation with the very norms she wished to disrupt. Determined not to falter, she acknowledged that the coming days would demand even more of her, an unyielding commitment to her vision, clarity in her purpose, and an unshakable ability to adapt under pressure.
As she fashioned a fierce resolve, an unexpected thought emerged. Perhaps true leadership was rooted in vulnerability, an embrace of the unknown that lay ahead. With the meeting approaching, there was one unyielding question still lurking at the back of her mind. Could she transform doubt into support, and skepticism into a catalyst for change? The answer would decide not only her future, but also the legacy she hoped to build.
The moment of truth was upon her. The invitation had been sent, but would her father show up to witness her ideas unfold? Would he be ready to embrace her direction, or would she stand alone in her quest? As the clock ticked down to the meeting, shadows of uncertainty loomed, whispering the delicate balance between ambition and loss. The day of the board meeting arrived, thick with anticipation and a sense of impending confrontation. Sarah stood at the entrance of the conference room, her palms slightly clammy as she gathered her thoughts. She had spent every moment leading up to this presentation refining her strategy, blending social advocacy with quantifiable metrics. She wanted to challenge her father's vision and secure her own. As she entered, the atmosphere surged with unspoken tension, each board member seated with stoic expressions that masked their true opinions. Today was no longer just about the proposal. It was about her identity. She was prepared to assert her voice, no longer consigned to the shadows of her father's legacy. As she positioned herself in front of the room, she felt the lingering weight of his earlier resistance. Would he see her as a worthy successor or a naive challenger? The uncertainty surged around her, yet a flicker of determination ignited within. "Thank you all for coming," she began, her voice steady, although a pulse of anxiety rippled through her. "I'm here to present a vision that infuses social responsibility into our core business strategy, not at the expense of our profitability, but as a commitment to our future stability." She launched into her presentation, each slide a careful balance of data-driven results and compelling narratives around community engagement. Numbers showcased potential growth, while stories from successful advocacy initiatives plugged directly into the company's market goals. Gradually, she felt the room's atmosphere shift. The initial skepticism began to dissolve as board members leaned in, their attention solidifying around her vision. Then, during a pivotal moment in her pitch, she visibly connected the dots. "Imagine the impact we could have, not just through profits, but as a pioneer in sustainable business practices. Businesses that embrace this shift not only thrive, they redefine trust with consumers. This is our opportunity to lead, not follow." Addressing her father was both thrilling and terrifying. She locked eyes with him, seeking unspoken approval while simultaneously challenging him to recognize the urgency of evolution. The silence in the room was deafening, as her father's face betrayed a hint of realization, demonstrating a flicker of acknowledgement that this new direction bore potential. Yet the moment hung delicately between them. "Sarah, while your passion is commendable, how are we to convince shareholders that this is a prudent investment strategy?" he posed, his skepticism woven into his intent to protect their legacy. "By demonstrating consistent consumer loyalty and market responsiveness to social issues," she countered, drawing her arguments tightly against the established data. "Investing in causes that resonate with customers will ultimately cultivate deeper engagement, leading not just to retention, but growth. We aren't merely selling products, we're selling a commitment to the community." As she continued, a wave of questions flowed from various board members, each reflecting a mix of curiosity and concern. Yet Sarah felt more confident responding, the dialogue shifting toward a collaborative inquiry rather than an antagonistic defense. The fear that had once constricted her thoughts began to dissolve, replaced by a growing clarity fueled by her belief. When the discussion shifted, she sensed a pivotal moment, not just for the proposition, but for her relationship with her father. If we're to solidify our brand's legacy, shouldn't we enhance it with integrity and social value? Is that not a legacy worth building? Her words lingered in the air like a challenge, inviting a deeper reflection. As the meeting drew to a close, the tension began to ease. A few board members nodded in agreement, igniting conversations around her proposal, even venturing into practical collaborative strategies. Yet her father remained silent, his expression unreadable. Taking a breath, she reassured herself that she had risen to the occasion. This was a pivotal achievement, a testament to the growth she'd undergone through navigating self-doubt and familial pressures. She had transformed into an assertive advocate for change, one worthy of leading her vision into reality. When the meeting concluded, the expectant silence returned. People shuffled out until only her father remained. She braced herself for an expected confrontation, but was greeted by a contemplative silence, a shift that grounded her anxiety. "Sarah," he began, the sting of disappointment still echoing in his voice, but softened by genuine curiosity. "You've surprised me. This could work, if you're prepared to commit fully, but it won't be easy." "Dad, I wouldn't have it any other way," she replied, her voice unwavering. "I'm ready to build something that reflects both my ambitions and our shared legacy." In that moment, they stood at a quiet crossroads, two generations connected by a new promise. The opportunity for collaboration loomed ahead, a hope that genuine dialogue might bridge their differences. As she left the room, a wave of satisfaction washed over her. She had faced her fears, carved her identity, and emerged triumphant. Not only had she advanced her career, but also transformed her father into a potential ally. Finally, she felt solid confidence in her direction. Sarah was no longer just the daughter of a legacy. She was the architect of her destiny, ready to step into an established position that would meld progress with conviction.
Now was the time to embrace new challenges, not merely for herself, but as part of a broader movement of redefining success in her professional landscape. Her journey had only just begun, but she was equipped with every tool she needed to navigate what lay ahead. Courage, determination, and a relentless commitment to authenticity. To all of you who resonated with Sarah's journey, this is the moment to show your support. You need to subscribe now to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Your actions truly matter. Comment below your thoughts and theories about this transformational ending. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this incredible conclusion.